So the me of light took his hand and we started walking into the forest. And once again, another panic attack happened. And in that moment, the forest faded away and a backdrop of stars appeared, and I grew even bigger, and I scooped up Mr. Virgil like a baby, and all I could think about was making him feel how much he was loved. I wanted him to feel peace and to know that everything was okay. Hi, I'm Helen Gretchen Jones, and I'm so happy to be here today sharing my story. I am a death doula, and I frequently sit with patients who are transitioning. And when I do, I have beautiful shared death experiences. And today I'd like to share one of the most profound experiences that I had. So I volunteer with an organization here in Central Texas, which is where I'm located, called NOTA. NOTA stands for No One Dies Alone. And it's a hospital-based program for patients who never had kids, or they're the last of their kind, or perhaps they burned all their bridges and they don't have anyone to sit with them as they pass away. So they need volunteers to fill that shift. Well, I had been staying up late. I'd been out with friends, and I saw that an email came through, and it was an activation of a NOTA patient. And when I looked at it, it was already after midnight. When I looked at the email, and I hit the time slots, all the good time slots were filled up. Nobody wants the midnight to 3 a.m. shift, for example. That's a hard one to do. But there was a 6 a.m. shift. And I really felt this inner need to be there, but I was so tired and I didn't want to set an alarm. I just told my team in spirit, I just said, all right, guides, if I'm supposed to be there, then you're going to have to wake me up, and you're going to have to do it by 4:30 because I need time to get dressed and get down to the hospital. And at 4:28, sure enough, I wake up to the sound of a song playing in my head. And the song is by a band called the Black Pumas, and the song is called Colors. And I thought, oh, okay, well, here we go. So I'm getting dressed and I'm heading down to the hospital. I turn on the radio in the car to kind of get me awake, and it's Colors by the Black Pumas playing on the radio. And I thought, okay, guys, so this is going to be sort of a relevant part of what I'm about to go do. In the song, they talk about, the green meadows and the blue skies and this really beautiful surrounding outdoor with nature. It's really, really beautiful. And even in the second part of the song, there's a lyric that says, now take me to the other side. And I had never heard that part of the lyric before, but it is very relevant when you're helping someone transition. So at that time, I also had an inner knowing that my patient was going to be a male. He was going to be Black, and he was going to be experiencing panic around nearing death. And the only reason that those details are important is because it allows me, when I get there, when that information is validated, to know that I am connected to spirit and that they are guiding me with the process of helping this person transition. So when I arrive, those details are validated, and I attempt to sit with Mr. Virgil. That's what I call him. Of course, I've changed his name. As I sit with Mr. Virgil, he is having every 90 seconds panic around his impending death, and it's very stressful for him. They are medicating him for that, but it doesn't seem to be working. I placed my hands on him, hoping to bring him peace. And when that didn't work, I knew that I was going to have to connect to him on a soul level. So as I sit down and I turn inward and I do a little meditation and a prayer, and I set my intention for bringing him peace, all of a sudden, the hospital room transformed into the most beautiful green meadow with the blue skies. There was big yellow flowers, bigger than I'd ever seen, off to the side as well. And I am standing in this field of flowers, in this meadow, with Mr. Virgil. I am in two worlds at once. I am aware that the physical me is holding Mr. Virgil's hand in the hospital, and I'm also aware that there's a soul me or spiritual me standing in this meadow with a spiritual aspect of Mr. Virgil as well. I could hear a welcome home party starting up, and it was ahead of us and to the right, straight ahead and to the right, just beyond a forest. And I knew that we were going to have to walk through that forest to walk Mr. Virgil to his welcome home party. As we start to walk towards the forest, towards his party, he has another panic attack, and he is very, very stressed, and he has a lot of anxiety around this transition. And then suddenly, a being of light steps out of the forest. She is huge. She's much bigger than we are. She is blue and white light. She's beautiful. And in that moment, I suddenly realized it was also me. And this is the most transformative experience that I have ever felt. I had so much love for Mr. Virgil. I had so much, it didn't matter what he did or didn't do, what he said or never said. He was so perfect. And the reason that this is important is I'm also a mom. And so I think I love my children unconditionally. But the truth is, I do put conditions on them. I want them to have a happy life. I want them to sit up straight at the dinner table. I want them to eat their vegetables. It doesn't mean my love for them will change, but I do put conditions on them that I expect for them to meet, or I hope that they will. But when it came to my love and connection to Mr. Virgil as the being of light, none of that mattered. Nothing mattered. Everything about him was absolutely perfect. When he looked up at me, I guess it's important to note that I was having a visual perspective of the me in the hospital, the me in the field, and the me of light. It was all happening at one time, and yet it wasn't confusing. I could see from all three perspectives all at one time. And I think it's important to note that where I was, every single blade of grass emanated light. Every single leaf on those trees emanated light. Every single tree, every single flower, everything was like it was glowing from the inside out. And everything was a life. I could feel it. And everything was more intense. The colors were more intense, and it was so still. It was peaceful. So as the me of light, I'm trying to bring peace to Mr. Virgil, and he is suggesting that he isn't worthy of going into the forest, that he was a sinful man, that he had a lot of regrets in life, and he didn't feel like he deserved to go in. And I presented him, the me of light, with this golden box that had a purple ribbon tied around it, this little box. And in it, I explained to him it was his gift of life. This was the gift of Mr. Virgil. And anytime he wanted, he can open up this gift and he could see all of the experience he got to have. And there wasn't a good or a bad. They were just experiences, and they were beautiful just the way they were. And that seemed to be okay. He felt like it was okay to walk into the forest with me. And so we did. So the me of light took his hand and we started walking into the forest. And once again, another panic attack happened. And in that moment, the forest faded away and a backdrop of stars appeared. And I grew even bigger. And I scooped up Mr. Virgil like a baby. And I held him in my arms and I rocked him. And I kissed the top of his head. And all I could think about was making him feel how much he was loved, how much I loved him, how much he was important. I wanted him to feel peace and to know that everything was okay. And as soon as he calmed down, I put him back down and the backdrop of stars went away and the forest returned. As we continued down our walk a little bit further and we were getting closer and closer to the party, he turned to me, the me of light, and he said, "What about my nephew and my uncle? What's going to happen to them?" And when he said that, I, the me of light, sent him like this projection of potential probabilities or possibilities for both individuals. But when that happened, I lost the ability to have that perspective of the being of light. It shot back to the person, the me in the meadow. That was the only perspective I had for that brief moment. It was as though I wasn't allowed to see the potential possibilities and probabilities for these two people who were still experiencing their physical lives on Earth. So as soon as that projection was finished being shown to Mr. Virgil, he felt okay with that outcome. And all of a sudden, I had the awareness of all three perspectives again. As we approached the welcome home party, I could see his mom. She was holding a red balloon. I can hear music. And he decided right there at the end that he wanted to sit on a log at the edge of the forest before actually going all the way into the party. And as he sat there, the me of light turned and started to walk back to where we came and leave him alone. And as that happened, a nurse walked in into the hospital and wanted to get Mr. Virgil's vitals. And she was chatting away about how she was going to a bachelorette party and how she had big weekend plans. And I was just laughing to myself, thinking, here she was talking about this party she was going to and how we were just at the doorstep of another one, and how beautiful it really all is, because it's all about connection. It's all about these experiences. And that is around the time when the next volunteer stepped in. And as I was leaving, I could tell Mr. Virgil was about to take his last breath. And as I got to a location, I got to a restaurant, actually. I was going to meet a friend for lunch. And then a cardinal came and was pecking on the window. And so I called the NOTA head office and I said, could I check on the patient, Mr. Virgil? And they said, he just transitioned. So I feel like Mr. Virgil was coming by to say goodbye with the Cardinal. But the truth of the whole thing was I was a part of his death. I was a part of his transition through this shared death experience. And it was one of the most profound, extraordinary, transformative feelings I have ever had, experiences I have ever had. And I look forward to having more like that. I frequently have shared death experiences where I'm in two places at once. That's pretty common with the work that I do. But being in three worlds at once was completely different. And I had never felt love like that for anybody ever. So that is my shared death experience about Mr. Virgil. I have another patient story that I would like to share. And this is a woman who was also activated through NOTA. Her name was Mrs. Wilma. When I arrived to visit Mrs. Wilma, she was an elderly woman. She was also Black. And she was in her 90s and also dying alone. She wasn't without family. She had family. They were just unable to come in and visit her at this time. She was Baptist. That was on the little notes that they left. So I put music on my phone. I played hymns for her while I sat down next to her. I started to do a prayer. I know because I knew she was Baptist, I was connecting to her and praying with God and with her and really trying to form that heart connection with her. As I'm sitting there holding her hand, I opened my eyes and a young Mrs. Wilma was walking in the room. She was maybe only 10 or 12 years old. She was in black and white. And the reason that's important is because when I see spirit in black and white, they are usually showing me a time frame between 1920 and 1969. And I think that's only because of black and white photography. But that's just how I interpret it. So here she was appearing in black and white. She was dressed in her Sunday best, and she had a little dress on and some little shoes and socks, and she had her hair twisted into pigtails. And she walked over to me and took my hand, my other hand. My left hand was holding Mrs. Wilma bedside, and my right hand was then being held by a young version of Mrs. Wilma. When this happened, the hospital room transformed into this forest, like a pine tree forest, which we don't have really here in Central Texas. So it was an unusual experience. And she said that we were going to climb this tree off. There was a tree off to the right, a really big one, really kind of close by to us, even though we're in this forest. And she was like, we're going to climb this tree. She's saying all this without even moving her lips. And I'm just like, I don't know how we're going to climb the tree. Like the branches are way up high. But all of a sudden we just thought about it and we were at the top of the tree. And I had a full 360 view of the forest that I was in at the top of this tree. And yet I wasn't turning my head. It was as though I could see everything, even though my eyes were only focused straight ahead. And she said, this one tree thinks that it's one life, that it's one life in this forest. And this one tree has these roots, and every root that's branching off of this tree believes it's its own life. And every branch branching off of this tree believes it's its own life. And every leaf believes it's its own life. And the truth is, the leaf is part of the branch, it's part of the trunk, it's part of the roots, it's all one. And this was important for her to teach about that we are all connected, that we are all one, and it can never be any other way. This one tree believing it's one life, as you pull out in perspective, it's actually part of a forest, which is part of a whole other ecosystem, and it never ends. We are all connected. And this was an important teaching for her because this was an overarching theme throughout her entire life. So here she was experiencing segregation in our history of our nation here. And then here she was separate from family throughout her life and again dying alone. So Mrs. Wilma's big life lesson and the opportunity that she got to teach before she fully transitioned was the importance of connection, which she learned through separation, which really can feel heartbreaking whenever you are going through separation, but it really is such a beautiful lesson in connection. And so that is my story with Mrs. Wilma. So those were two of my favorite stories that I have experienced so far, but I wanted to share a little bit about how I sort of started having these experiences and how I got into that. Um, I've always, for as long as I can remember, had an experience with spirit. I've always had a connection to them. Even when I was 4 or 5 years old, when I needed to find some space for myself, or if I was feeling overwhelmed with what might be happening at home, I would go into the bathroom and lay down or sit in an empty bathtub and just focus on the silence. And I didn't know it then. My family weren't, they weren't meditators. It wasn't, no one knew what I would have been doing. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was just focusing on the silence. And what I realize now is I was sort of doing a meditation and kind of allowing myself to tune into what was happening around me in a peaceful way. And frequently during that time, a spirit would come through and they would offer, I don't know, beautiful words. They would tell me everything was going to be okay. I welcomed the experience. It was always positive. And as I grew, I continued to rely on the transformative experiences from my childhood. When I would have, like, for example, if I would see spirit when I was 12 or 13, I remember going and telling my parents the next morning that there was a man in my room. It was like a being of light, like an angel or a guide. And it's like it was yesterday. Like I could explain everything in such vivid detail. It was amazing. And when I told them, they were like, "Oh, I believe you believe that's what you saw," which is a little disheartening. But it was so transformative that it didn't make me question the experience that I had. It made me question the wisdom of my parents, even at a very early age. So I sort of relied on spirit to get me through these challenges because I wasn't always able to rely on my parents. So in 2015, my dad passed away. He transitioned. And when he did, he was only in his 50s. He was very young. When he transitioned, it left a lot of unfinished business between him and one of my sisters. There was a desperate need for closure for both of them. And my sister felt like she didn't get that. And when I heard about death doulas shortly after that, I thought, wow, I can help someone find closure and peace before they transition so that other families don't have to experience what we did with my sister and my dad. And I wanted to be a part of that. So when I set my intentions to help people transition, that's when the shared death experiences started happening, when I actually started sitting with patients with the intent to bring peace. And I started having new levels of awareness around what it is to die, that it's not final, that we're never alone, and that we work up in our minds a fear around it that's so much worse than what it actually is. So in my experience so far, and I understand that can change tomorrow with everything, but my experience so far, my patients are standing outside their bodies before the final breath is taken. And the reason that this is important is because it reiterates that the body is like a vehicle, right? So our soul or our spirit selves, like we're out here and we're using this body as a vehicle, as a way of experiencing. And we come into this, we don't even come into it really. It's like our body's in our spirit, but we utilize this body for these experiences and we set up a space that has a beginning and an end. That's the only reason time is relevant. And thank goodness it's here or it would never end, right? This experience. So we need time to go ahead and put an end to this experience that we wanted to have. So when our body starts to putter out, some people are in their body for a long time. Some people are in their body for a short time. Some people drive their body around really, really hard and never take it in for maintenance and run it into the ground. And other people are very careful with their vehicle and they take it in and they're, try to get as much out of it as they can. But regardless of how you treat your vehicle, when it starts to putter out, you hop out of it and you watch it coast to a stop from a different vantage point, from a different observing point. And that's what's happening as we're sitting with patients and our families and our loved ones are watching someone transition and what appears to be struggling to take that last breath. It's actually not the case. The person transitioning is already outside their body, observing from a very safe place, typically standing right there with the family. And they can feel that love that the family is offering. They can feel that grief that the family is experiencing. And for them, it's a new experience, but it isn't a scary one. It isn't a hard one. It isn't one that is fearful. In fact, my team in spirit frequently tells me that it's easier to die than it is to be born. So not to give anyone any more irrational fears around anything, but being born apparently is a little bit harder than dying. So I think it's important to know that if you have a loved one who's dying and you can't make it bedside for that final breath, the final breath is that's not the end of everything. Your person is already outside their body. You can start a connection to them before they die. You could start a connection with them after they die. The final breath is just the body returning to the earth, but not the spirit. So another thing that I think we should talk about is how to connect to your team in spirit, especially or when someone's about to transition. It's important to, I think, to sit silently, to try to close your eyes, take deep breaths, and try to alleviate yourself of all the distractions that you have. It's very, very common and normal that when you sit down, you might think to yourself, did I start the dishwasher? Did I remember? Do I have all the ingredients for dinner tonight? That's normal. And, sometimes people are like, oh, you got to clear your mind. There's no clearing your mind. You're human. So there isn't like your mind is never going to be a blank slate. So that's not a thing. But what you can do is shift your focus. And that's the important part. So when you set the intention, and I call it intention, but you can call it prayer, whatever word works for you. And you say, okay, God or angels or spirit or universe, whatever vocabulary word is comfortable for you. And you're like, I'm here and I want to connect to you. And you just take a few deep breaths and you can just wait. And here's the thing. A lot of people think it's going to be this big booming voice that's going to come in it's going to be so bold that they can't dismiss it. But the truth is it's actually very subtle and it's easy to dismiss. When I explain connecting to spirit to people, I would say, close your eyes. Now imagine the beach, and feel the sand beneath your toes and the waves lapping up around your ankles. Hear the cry of the seagull and feel that breeze blowing through your hair or caressing your skin. And now at the same time, be aware of the chair you're sitting in. So that's what it feels like to be in two worlds at once. It feels almost like a creation, which it sort of is. And oftentimes people are like, oh, I'm making it up. I'm creating it. It's all my imagination. And what's so great about being human is we create the world we live in. We create it and we co-create it. So the whole part of us being human here, yes, is to use our imagination to create something. So why not create that connection to your team, your angels, your guides, your God? So as you're sitting there and you're creating a moment for that to happen, you could be imagining sitting on a park bench and letting a guide step in. You can imagine sitting on the beach and suddenly one of your team in spirit comes and sits next to you. It isn't about the place that you imagine. It's about the message that comes through after. The message that comes through can feel like a thought, and it can feel like it's your own thought, and that's okay. Write it down. It could feel like a song lyric, a movie quote. It could be an image that comes into your mind. Perhaps you think of a ladybug. Whatever it is, you write it down. And if you were to do this, just 5 to 10 minutes every day for a week, and then you do it again for 2 weeks, what you look back from what you wrote, from day 1 to day 14, you're going to see a huge growth and development in your ability to discern your own thoughts from a divine thought. And those divine thoughts come in more quickly. They come in very, very fast and before you can even piece it all together. So if you were to sing a song in your head, let's say Jingle Bells, and you're singing with your mouth closed, you're singing in your head, jingle bells, and all of a sudden a thought comes in over that, or an idea comes in over that, that would be more divine because your brain is focused on the lyrics and saying them in your head, which is slow. Spirit is much faster than that. So if you're not repeating the words in your head, then most likely that is your connection to spirit and that is your message that you're receiving. I know that's a lot of information to take in. I also think that it would be really cool if you could have that information validated. And one way to do that is to ask for a sign. And a lot of people pick the sign that they want. And I haven't found that to be as effective. What I have found to be more effective is if you say, okay, guys, this is the message I believe I got, but I need to have it validated. I'm going to need a sign, and it's going to need to be a big one. So you close your eyes, you take a deep breath, and you say, all right, my sign is going to be, and then you think of nothing. And then the first thing that comes into mind is your sign. This is your way of asking spirit to give you the sign that you're going to receive. And this is because your team in spirit has a higher perspective in which they can see the strongest probability of the choices you're going to make over the next day or two. So if you received a rose as your sign, and then maybe you go to Starbucks and you place your order, you get up there to pay, and the barista's name is Rose, or she's got a rose tattoo on her arm. It's really that simple. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be like this purple monkey playing a piano in your closet. It's nothing big and bold. It really is something simple, but allow spirit to drop the image into your mind because they know what you're about to encounter in your world. So messages and spirit and signs, they're within the flow of everyday life. If it's a song lyric, perhaps you're going to be grocery shopping and the song's going to come over the store's speaker system. It's really simple and it's that beautiful. So I have a few really awesome signs that I have received from spirit. So I call my spirit A-Team. And my husband, when I told him that, he was just like, oh, A-Team, like the 80s crime fighter TV show. And it's a little bit before my time, but I do remember Mr. T. And I was just like, oh no, I've named my guides after a crime fighting TV series. And then I told my team while meditating, I was like, you guys, this is a lame name that we've chosen. Like we need a all new name. I want something that is singular, that means oneness, that more accurately represents a collective. So, all right, guys, I'll be waiting for a sign from you guys. So I end the meditation and I have to take my cat to the vet right away. We load up, we get to the vet, and a temporary dumpster is being delivered and blocking all the parking spaces to the vet clinic. The dumpster is olive green, and in big, bold white letters on the side, it says A-Team. I started laughing because in that moment, I realized that A is singular in the English language, and it does mean one, but it also implies that we are a team. And my team in spirit, my guides, need me as much as I need them. And so together, we are a collective. And then another really cool sign story I had was I wanted to go to Virginia. I wanted to for this class at the Monroe Institute, actually. And I didn't feel comfortable going and taking a vacation just for me. I have kids and a husband, and it felt kind of selfish. And I wasn't really sure if this was something that I was really going to gain any more information on. But I asked for a sign. I said, okay, guys, I'd like to go if this is in my highest and greatest good. So could I get a sign, like make it happen for me? Um, and after that, I left to go visit a client, was at her house for 2 hours, left, was driving back home, and I'm yielding, ready to merge into traffic, and someone rear ends me, like hits the back of my car. And I was like, oh, bummer, So we pull over and I take a picture of her driver's license. Oh, I missed a part that was really important. The trip to Virginia, I've always wanted to drive the, what's it called? Blue Ridge Parkway. So beautiful. And every time I would tell my husband, let's go vacation over, by the Blue Ridge Parkway in the mountains, and he'd be like, near, 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 near. Like it was like something he did not want to do. And so I thought this would be my opportunity. I could maybe fly into Georgia, rent a car, and then drive the Blue Ridge Parkway all the way to Virginia. That was kind of what I was thinking maybe could happen. So anyway, back to my story. I get rear-ended. I take a picture of her license, and it's 411 Blue Ridge Expressway, Blue Ridge Parkway, pardon me. And 411 means information. So not only did I get rear-ended by a woman whose address is the road I want to road trip on, Blue Ridge Parkway, it's also 411. So I'm just like, wow, okay. Well, it wasn't a really big hit. Okay, it was like a rolling stop, no big deal. I didn't think it was a big deal. Of course, it was a relatively new car, a ranch truck, really, which is going to get scratched up anyway. Let's be honest, it's a ranch truck. But my husband was more like, it's still new. It's not scratched up yet. So he was a little upset over it and he wanted to have the bumper replaced. So we file the insurance claim and the insurance check arrives, and it is for the same amount as the cost of the trip. Well, by that time, my husband is not as thrilled about changing the bumper. I'd already had a few more scratches and we had some horses chew some paint off of it. So it wasn't as it wasn't as a big deal to get the bumper replaced as we thought. And so the check covered the cost of my trip and I went. So that was another really big synchronicity that aligned. Okay, I'll share one more. Okay. So I was sitting in meditation and I was questioning about expanding my job. I don't know what you would call it, what I do, to connecting in mediumship to connect other people to spirit. And I said, if that's going to be the case, I'm going to need a really big sign, not just a little feather, the whole freaking bird. This was me telling them what I wanted, which is not what I recommend, but it was me being a little sarcastic and just telling them I need the whole freaking bird, not just a little feather. So I leave. I tell my daughter, all right, let's go get lunch. And we're heading to the car, and a pigeon, AKA a messenger pigeon, which is I'm asking if I can receive messages from spirit. A messenger pigeon flies off my roof, and it is like slow motion coming at my face. I scream and I duck, and it lands at my feet. Now, I live in a very suburban home in the way out. So in 15 years of living there, never once have I seen a pigeon in my neighborhood. And I'm a bird watcher. I have lots of bird feeders and fountains. I call it Cafe Gretchen. And I am very avid with watching birds. And this was the only time a pigeon has ever landed in our yard. He had bands on his feet. It turns out he was a racing pigeon. He had just been released in Oklahoma, was on his way back to San Antonio. So I guess he stopped at my house for a quick pit stop and also to be the whole freaking bird, just long enough to get the point across from spirit that moving in the direction of helping people connect to spirit was a go. So that was just another story of asking for signs and synchronicities. This has been so much fun sharing some of my spiritual stories and shared death experiences and signs and synchronicities from spirit. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I guess if you'd like to get a hold of me, my name is Helen Gretchen Jones, and you can go to helengretchenjones.com. I also have a book called Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides, and that's available at barnesandnobles.com and Amazon, of course. And it's in Kindle, it's in paperback, and in Audible, read by yours truly. For those of you who like to read while running errands, that's me. I like the audiobooks. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or ideas, I welcome it all. My email is available on my website. So thank you so much for listening.